Welcome to the Chapter 2 lecture, where we will cover Business Continuity Management Organization. I'm Dr. Bill Perkins, and this lecture is based on material from the textbook Business Continuity and Risk Management, Essentials of Organizational Resilience by Kurt Engemann and Douglas Henderson. So we're going to get started. So in this chapter, we will cover the following objectives. We're going to determine the organizational requirements to plan for crisis events. We're going to identify individuals and teams needed to execute response and recovery plans. And then we're going to define the relationship between various teams and individuals in the BCM, Business Continuity Management Program. So business continuity management roles from individuals, teams, and committees before, during, and after a crisis event. Developing strategies, establishing the operation requirements, and identifying resources needed are all essential BCM roles. The desired organizational BCM structure should be functionally scalable and ready to expand or contract to meet the needs of the crisis. Now, functional areas throughout the organization should be analyzed and represented. And because some functional areas play an organization-wide role in the BCM framework, the magnitude of the functional areas have on the BCM role will differ from functional area to functional area. And, in comparison, especially to functional areas with a narrow focus. So a good example would be human resources being responsible for compliance standards and training in comparison to purchasing, which would be focused on resources needed for program design, development, and institution. Now, teams play a significant role in business continuity management. Now, teams should have an appointed team leader and an alternate. Now, because it is recommended that teams maintain manageable membership, it isn't out of the norm that the team members will have multiple roles and responsibilities. So when it comes to BCM, it is important to mitigate single point failures. So it is prudent to ensure team members are cross-trained to perform one another's role in case a member can't work with the team due to organizational obligations or due to the nature of the crisis. Now, in strategy development, teams identify the duration and scope of outage events, so service priorities and key resources on which plans rely. Now, to establish the operation requirements, it is necessary to define the type of service to be provided, the time by which the service should be provided, and the customers to whom the service should be provided. Now, at the onset of a crisis, the organization must shift from an ops normal mode to a safety and security concerns mode. Business continuity plan execution, of continuity of operations plan execution, either one, depending on the type of organization. They will demand different responsibilities from employees than what normal operations demands. Now, rapid decisions need to be made and key employees need to execute plans such as response and recovery plans. Now, it is not necessary to effectively execute plans in a crisis situation if decisions are being made by a committee. Now, therefore, it is important for a committee to make decisions about the BCM infrastructure while times are simple. Okay, not when they're complex. Sometimes when things are complex, people will be kind of making a lot of decisions on the fly, under pressure, maybe even a little knee-jerk, or going to some kind of a contingency plan. But really, the committee has that type of time and capacity to collaborate when times are simple. Now, the Business Continuity Management Steering Committee is the primary decision-making group for the BCM program. The committee has oversight on BCM at the corporate level and reviews and approves the BCM program. So the BCM Steering Committee, comprised of senior management representing all primary functional areas, determines the scope, corresponding resources, timeframes, and responsibilities associated with the BCM program. Now, the business continuity planning team is responsible for providing professional guidance throughout the development, implementation, and maintenance of the BCM program. So this team develops the guidelines, methodologies, standards, and best practices to be used in the BCM program, and the group is also responsible for adherence of all planning activity to the organization's organizational protocols and standards. The business continuity planning team works with functional areas and technical individuals throughout the organization to develop plans at the business level or the business unit level. And the business continuity management coordinator is an individual who has overall responsibility for BCM at each specific location. The BCM coordinator ensures that the BCM program is properly planned. This includes assisting management in defining objectives and scope and developing budgets and schedules. The BCM coordinator utilizes task forces and reports to senior management on the program's accomplishments. The BCM coordinator performs regular updates to plan documentation and arranges for periodic plan exercises and actively participates in actual crisis events. The BCM coordinator provides frequent feedback to management while acting on its behalf. So the BCM coordinator should ideally be a business continuity professional who can work well with an organizational setting and has excellent communication skills to coordinate the work of teams and motivate individuals. So the BCM coordinator should possess strong analytical ability, technical competence, leadership skills, and knowledge. Now, the BCM coordinator has key responsibilities in responding to crisis events and is closely involved with the development, implementation, and maintenance of the BCM program. The Crisis Management Team, or CMT, has overall responsibility to manage crisis events. Let me repeat that. The Crisis Management Team, CMT, has overall responsibility to manage crisis events. The CMT includes senior management with the authority to manage active crisis events and is responsible for the following: to gather facts and analyze conditions regarding a crisis, to make decisions during a crisis, and to allocate internal resources, and also to obtain needed external resources. I'll leave this up here for you note takers. Now, a crisis communication team is normally tasked or empowered at the corporate level to maintain consistent communications and contact with the media. The crisis communication team communicates with stakeholders and conducts all media communications. And the crisis communication team is typically a group at the corporate level with liaison members designated as major organizational areas or functional areas. Crisis communication requires extensive planning and should always involve clear statements so that everyone involved receives consistent information. Something else I want to highlight here about this communication spokesperson. The most critical individuals in communications personnel and the spokesperson slash public relations or public affairs personnel, but they are usually in charge of media communications, and it's a single individual who often performs these both functions actually in organizations, usually non-government organizations. And an emergency response team, ERT, team is an assembly of primary and alternate members at each major location responsible for the response to a crisis. Now, all members are personnel who are familiar with their functional area or department's responsibilities. Now, alternate members execute their responsibilities in the absence of a primary member. And all primary and alternate members need to be knowledgeable of overall BCM operations. So members must also be available during a crisis. So it wouldn't be wise to assign someone who is vulnerable to being overly tasked with other responsibilities, or one who is geographically removed to a degree where it would be, and I guess in a some kind of an impediment for them to respond to the crisis in a timely fashion. I'll leave this up here for you note takers. Something else I would like to highlight about the ERT is ERT members and alternates are required to attend planning sessions and exercises organized by the BCM Coordinator. ERT membership should encompass, that team members should be drawn from a range of geographical locations, like I stated earlier, to reduce the probability of severe impact to multiple members from a community-wide crisis. Also, team members should be capable of handling physically and emotionally stressful situations. Renters and single employees will likely have fewer personal responsibilities after a community-wide crisis. So usually they tend to be, more available for ERT responsibilities. And vacations should be coordinated so that a large number of ERT members are not out of the area at any given time. Now, think about it. During COVID, a lot of organizations restricted ERT or key leadership members from exposing themselves by setting rules on activities in their personal life by quarantining them. Now, the organization's incident commander is in charge of the ERT. The incident commander is the individual responsible for the command and control, or C2, of all aspects of a crisis. The incident commander must have the authority and ability to make quick decisions in critical situations. And as the person who is in charge of the response efforts, the incident commander should be an officer of the organization. Now, for a significant organization-wide crisis event, it is not uncommon to find the chief operating officer, the COO, and not the CEO at the top of the chain of command for emergency response purposes. Usually that COO is a bit closer and has a better operational understanding, because we're talking at the operational level of the cross-functional areas that serve underneath. Now, it is important for the organization to identify several individuals to serve as incident commander and to specify a chain of command. The chain of command is the order of authority within an organization during a crisis. The chain of command is not necessarily the same organizational command order used during times of normal operations. And the actual incident commander will be available. It will be an individual who's usually available and who is highest on the chain of command. And the ERT is headed by the incident commander and consists of management personnel representing areas of the organization that have critical plan execution responsibilities. So overall, incident command is relinquished to the responding civil authorities at their request. Now, other teams are involved in the business continuity management organization. The damage assessment team assesses and documents damages caused by a crisis. And the recovery team is designated to provide for stabilization and resumption of operations caused by a crisis. And other teams to perform specific functions may be designated by individual departments as necessary. And figure 2.1 here from the text, depicted on this slide, illustrates the layout we have covered in this lesson. The business continuity management organization, it provides an illustration of the flow of communication as well as provides a hierarchical layout. Notice how the flow of communication and information sharing is not linear, and there's redundancy, which proves to be effective in eliminating those single point failures we were talking about earlier. And that concludes our lecture for Chapter 2. So please check out Blackboard for the Chapter 2 deliverables, and I will see you in Chapter 3.